We've got a feeble-minded, trigger-happy president who plunged us into a war where no threat was present, with no clear objectives and no exit plan. We need to call that what it is. That's fascism. Or at least it's fascist curious, as they would be.
Governor Tim Walz joins us now. Today he launched the Small Town PAC that will seek to recruit and support Democrats in rural communities nationwide. Governor, let's talk about that speech that you gave in Spain. A feeble-minded, trigger-happy president. What is the antidote?
Yeah, well, I was being kind, I think, in that moment. Prime Minister Sanchez in Spain gathered global progressive leaders. President Lula from Brazil was there, South African president, and so many leaders. And the argument is the antidote is to recognize that progressive policies that lift people out of poverty and bring dignity to all human beings is a global issue, especially as we see authoritarianism creeping across the globe. And I think being unified in this with an understanding in Europe, in sub-Saharan Africa, and Latin America, that we used to be a solid partner, we being the United States. And my point in being there is at the subnational level and as far as our people, we still care about these things. We're still there. And the antidote is delivering policies, not talking about it, but when you get elected, delivering on policies that lift children out of childhood poverty, that invest in public education, that eradicate diseases and give people an opportunity to believe that tomorrow can be better, whether that's in Cameroon or in Minneapolis. And I was grateful to see those folks there. There was an energy. There's an understanding that the old world order is gone and that it's all of us that are going to have to see what we can create out of that. And I think my role here is that I think there's a golden opportunity because of the policies of Donald Trump. The most negative effects are being felt in areas that can least afford to have that happen. And that's rural areas in towns like I grew up in Butte, Nebraska, 500 people. And that's what I wanted to see. That's what I want the rest of the world to see. And my message to them is, look, I don't speak for the federal government now, but I think I speak for a lot of Americans. Don't give up on us. We're still in this fight for humanity. We believe that people's lives matter, no matter what side of the globe they're on. And that was it was very uplifting, and it was there was energy in that room.
Governor, let's take that argument that you made and really that plea, if you will, to that global community and bring it back to your backyard and where you grew up, the backyard you grew up in, and backyards like that across America, a large part of certainly the middle of the country being felt or at least feeling left out of conversations for generations, which is why in many respects we're here, because they have felt left out. It wasn't just something
that's right.
We woke up in 2015 and 16 and Donald Trump was there magically to sort of start this thing. How do you translate progressivism, progressive policies to rural America, an America that largely paints itself red? I would dare say in your hometown where you grew up, I would bet if you lined up 10 people and asked them to pick a color, it would likely be more red than blue. And that's fine because there are a lot of Democrats who represent and live in these communities. And they're right now trying to figure out how do I craft that narrative to tell the story of where I grew up and to help America appreciate this small town is as much of the story of America as the big city or the exurbs or what have you. So how do you make that translation work?
Yeah, and I think people have tried to do this. Look, I take it quite a bit differently than the current vice president in the negativism of his hillbilly elegy around where my relatives are and growing up in that small town. I think the thing, Michael, is that we being progressives have to do a better job of connecting these policies to an improvement in life. And look, there have been technological changes. There has been a shift in how things have happened. But I take, for example, my school. I had 24 classmates. It was one building, K-12. We were right in there, kindergartners with the seniors. And I got an incredible education. So we have Republicans advocating school vouchers. Who's going to build a private school there? We know they're not. They're going to transfer that to an existing private school, basically giving tax breaks for someone else who has that, and the cuts will come from those public schools. Or what we're seeing with the Medicaid cuts, those are going to impact rural hospitals. So the foundations of neighbors that were there that built pride in these communities, they see them withering away. And quite honestly, the thing I hear a lot of is what difference does it make who we elect? So I think Democrats have to be making the case strongly that the policies that we're advocating for, strong public schools and education, strong access to health care, and this ability to understand that as you have, for example, the Trump policies around agriculture that are putting traditional 100-year century farms that have been in families 3 and 4 generations at risk. You've got the vice president who's part of a company that goes in with venture capital and sweeps up those acres on penny on the dollar. And we've got to show them that, look, I'm not asking you to vote for Democrats. We keep doing this all the time. How do we go out there and get them to vote for us? Well, I'll tell you what I've always believed is good politics will follow good policy. And we have to advocate for those. And what I'm doing is I launched my PAC today because I was a 40-year-old school teacher and I had absolutely zero political experience. I never attended a rally. I never attended a caucus. I voted, and that was about it. And your viewers right now, there's people out there that I know should be in Congress. They should be mayors. They should be vice presidential candidates. They won't if the infrastructure is not there. In Minnesota, I had the advantage that people like the late Senator Paul Wellstone built organizations like Wellstone Action that took and trained me and put a door in the middle of an auditorium on a Saturday, a screen door, and had us knock on it and practice how you would door knock and talk to someone, because I had no experience in that. And all of a sudden, you've got infrastructure. We keep thinking we're going to have, catch lightning in a bottle and the next great orator is going to come along. If it were about having the best ideas, Democrats would win every election. You know this better than anybody, Michael, that it's about infrastructure. It's about organization. It's about getting out and having people authentically talk. And our policies will make a difference. And I think this division, I'm a geographer, and I go back to this. The bane of my existence is that 2000 red-blue map that changed our perception of who our neighbors were. It changed the perception of being a united country. And we have got to go back out there, not to show up. And this is where Prime Minister Sanchez in Spain, that I really appreciate this. Progressives win elections, but they can't hold power. We have to figure out, once we move in a progressive way, once we see a Barack Obama win, once we see a Congress win, it has to be about not holding power for the sake of holding power. It has to be about passing things. And for this, Donald Trump has encouraged me, when we take power back, I'll tell you what, the next Democratic president better figure out a way to get universal health care. We're back in the same situation again. And it better improve the lives of those rural hospitals, because that's the way you get true power. Because we don't want to win to just win. We want to win so we can enact policies that improve people's lives. And that message was in Barcelona, and it's here in Minneapolis. It's in Butte, Nebraska. It's in Boise, Idaho. Places that I'm going. I'm encouraged. I see Pete Buttigieg in Oklahoma. I'm down in rural Texas with Beto O'Rourke. That's what we need, all hands on deck. So my launch of this today, and I got a whole bunch of people giving $5 to a PAC. And that should translate into infrastructure.
Yep.
Before we're out of time, Governor, any fundraising number to report on day one on our show?
Yeah, and it's at timwalz.com for all your folks who are out there. I think we raised about $50,000, and I think 95% of that was $5 donations. And again, there's all kinds. I want to be clear on this. That infrastructure, there's many people doing good work. We saw Stacey Abrams doing voter registration over the time. All of these things matter. But I think the experience I had growing up in a town of 500, growing up on a farm, and look, it's not about wearing Carhartts and changing your own oil. It's about understanding the angst that people are feeling. We do that a lot. Oh, he's wearing a Carhartt hat, so let's elect that dude. No, it's about understanding that I will fight with everything I have to protect those public schools. And you have to tell people this, because the Republicans will coat this in. It's school choice. You can send your kids where you want to. Where in Butte, Nebraska, are you going to find a private school? And who's going to teach there? How are you going to pay them? And I think that very core of America that made these small towns, I'm not Pollyannish. Amazon's going to displace the local hardware store in some cases. But there's an opportunity that people want to feel engaged. And I think Democrats, too long, we swoop in, We try and get votes. And look, Donald Trump played on the angst. He wasn't wrong. People were really angry. What he didn't do is provide any actual solutions, and he made it worse. There's a golden opportunity here to improve this country in a real tangible way. And if we look at it that way, they'll vote for us. And look, if we don't do that, we don't deserve them to vote for it. We certainly know, though, that there needs to be an alternative to what we're seeing right now. And, of course, the recklessness we see and the continued eroding of our rights, that's one thing. And people care about that, but they also care about the things that impact their families directly.